All right, perfect. How is everybody today? Good. I am excited to be here and to talk with you about probably one of the most biggest emotion-filled, fear-filled questions, which is what happens when we leave the school system with our child who is now becoming an adult, or maybe you have an adult with Rett. What happens next? How do we start creating not just financial security, but the life plan for your child and also your family? My name is Kacy Seitz. Like Paige mentioned, I met some of you in Nashville this last year, and I had a blast. I took tons of pictures and got to meet with a lot of kiddos and families. It was great. But I am a financial planner with Northwestern Mutual. I want to take just a moment to tell you why this topic means a lot to me, and also give you just a little bit of personal background on myself as we go through this, because this is not only something I'm passionate about, it's just like you, I'm living it every day as a special needs parent. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about the popularity, right? The commonality that we all share. And I hope to maybe remove some feelings of isolation as I go through these statistics. But I think it's really important as we dive into this topic to learn just how many of us there really are. 82% of caregivers are concerned that they do not have enough financial resources to last their disabled relative's lifetime. 77% of us are concerned we won't be able to retire. And if we do retire, about 70% of us believe that we're going to have to compromise in some way our own retirement plans. 60% of caregivers that have life insurance actually have less than $300,000 of coverage. And fewer than that have the protection of what's called permanent or whole life coverage. However, the lifetime cost for caring with a dependent, for example, with autism, is between $1.4 and $2.4 million. And yes, that is out of pocket, unfortunately. For those of us with complex medical kiddos, as I have as well, that number goes up even more. 73% of caregivers do not have a long-term care plan. Almost 90% are concerned about what will happen to our child when we are no longer living, right? What does life look like? 59% of us have not written a will addressing the special needs of their relative. 67% of parents have not set up a special needs trust, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, what that is, how it works. And then only 23% of families have what I would consider a formal, holistic financial plan for their adult child, with 37% working with an advisor. So these statistics came from an independent study done in 2016. The entire reason why I started creating educational workshops and how Paige and I met and I became more involved with IRSF over the years is I want to reduce these. I want more families to feel confident about their choices, about what you have locally to you that can be helpful in determining that plan and how this all works. One thing I also want to note as a caveat, and as we get into this discussion today, this information is mainly for United States residents and citizens. We have very different benefits and rules and laws in the United States versus other countries. And so I just want to make that caveat that this is primarily for those who live and have their child in the United States. Okay, this is my family. My husband and I, my husband's name is Dan. We've been married for 15 years this October, so we have an anniversary coming up, and we have 2 kids. Our daughter Hudsyn, who will be 12 here in a few weeks, she's there in the front, as you can see. She had a brain injury at birth, which created a whole host of probably similar symptoms to what maybe your kiddo with Rett experiences. So we deal with cerebral palsy, a pretty rare form of epilepsy called Lennox-Gastaut. She's fully G-tube dependent, nonverbal, non-mobile. And I love her to pieces, but I don't like talking about her diagnoses as who she is. I much prefer to tell you a little bit more about her as a person. She loves stories. Her favorite color is purple, which of course I think is awesome that the Rett community is big on purple as well. So we have that in common. She loves Latin music. Enrique Iglesias is one of her favorite musicians, and I can't disagree with her on that. And then she also loves anything that sparkles. So she's really, really big on Disney princesses, and we're going to Disney this December, and she loves traveling and doing things with our family. Our son Dominic is about to be 10 years old here in December. He actually was diagnosed with level 1 autism and ADHD. So we are a lucky family to receive both children that have their own set of needs and, of course, their own set of therapies and specialists that we manage on a daily basis. And he loves Roblox. He's very into Formula One racing, computer programming, and math. As a financial planner, he's a kid after my own heart, right? Professionally, I've been doing this for about 15 years. Hudsyn was the reason why, first of all, I became very frustrated with the financial services industry as a whole. I found it really hard to locate the information that Dan and I needed to really make decisions for Hudson's long-term care and her adult plan. And so as a result of that, I tried to create a both educational workshop series, but also what did I want to experience as a mom in learning this information, right? I wanted it to be simple. I wanted it to be straightforward. I didn't need a lot of complexity. We already deal with that on a regular basis. And so I founded our practice back in 2013. So I've been doing this now for about 10 years. And it is a national practice. We work with well over 400 families in multiple states, most of whom have a child or a dependent with a disability. I do a lot of advocacy work. Many of you may be familiar with Samantha Brant, who's local to me. She's a very dear friend of mine. We actually yesterday were just advocating at the state level for our Medicaid waiver system here. And so I serve on the DD Council along with a couple of other advisory councils as a volunteer and just as a parent who cares about what's going on in our community. I have a lot of different certifications professionally. The Chartered Special Needs Consultant is the one that really you should look for if you are interviewing financial planners. That designation is received through the American College, and it requires a specific coursework around this topic, around special needs planning. So be sure whoever you're working with on the financial planning advice, they have that designation if we are talking about long-term and special needs planning. Our mission really is to educate strategic partners, guide you as the caregiver, and then obviously facilitate some of these emotional conversations that come up with both you and other key family members that may be taking on the care after you're gone. Therefore, what we're trying to do here is not only hopefully establish a life care plan, but navigate the complexity of what this really takes for kids and adults with Rett, as well as any other disabilities or symptoms that may be occurring. And our goal here, just like Paige said, it's to create a sustainable, high quality of life, not only for your child, but everybody else in the family too, because we all deserve to have that. We approach this work with a lot of grace, integrity, and compassion to create that financial independence. These are some of my favorite faces across the country, different families that I've worked with and love on a regular basis. So I'll ask you this, when it comes to your finances or this topic in general, what do you worry about the most? A lot of things that we hear on a weekly basis, Kacy, we just don't know where to start. It's really overwhelming. And I get that. It is overwhelming. I totally acknowledge that. We have a lot in place already, but we don't have a funding plan for our daughter's special needs trust. I meet a lot of families that do have a special needs trust, and that's an excellent first step. But if you don't have a funding plan of what goes in it, how it's being managed, who is the team that's your replacement team after it's funded, we're not done yet. We still have to finish that part. I hear sometimes families say, well, I think we have it all taken care of. And I always encourage families to just double check. You know, one of the reasons why you're here is probably to just double check for those of you who have some of these things in place. Things are always changing in the special needs community and in terms of this type of legal, financial, and benefits planning. So it's always good to just go back every few years and review things. And then finally, wealthy families don't really need this planning. I mainly hear that from care managers, case managers, care coordinators, social workers, those types of folks. And I think it's because of, you know, the things that they deal with on a regular basis, which is fine. But I would I would politely disagree and say, actually, families who have more means or more assets really do need more planning in terms of what goes where, who gets what, and then how does that wealth transfer really look once we start funding the special needs trust. So if this is hitting any nerves for you, please comment, give us your feedback. Paige and I are going to go over some questions at the end, but I want to make sure that those of you who are attending today get some time at the end to ask your question if we don't get to it today. My goal is to provide you with information, right? I want you to have the confidence to take practical steps so that you can create this peace of mind. I want you to be confident that the people you love will be taken care of during your lifetime and then also after you're gone. That's a tough one, right? I'm a mom too. It's hard to think about who could caregive for Hudsyn and my son better than my husband and I. I don't know, right? We got to figure that out. We have to figure out the replacement team if we want to create that peace of mind. So as we go through these steps, I'd like you to keep a couple things in mind. Number one, it's never too soon to start planning, and the sooner you start, the better you will feel, promise. You do not have to do it all in one day. You don't even have to do it all in 1 year. Planning, in my opinion, is a process, and you can manage it over time. You start planning for the things you know for sure, and then as time moves on and you learn more, or as things change with your child, you can revise your plan. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, just know that's okay. It's very normal, but you can do this one step at a time. We take little baby steps and prioritize things just like we do for our child's care and all the care coordination that you manage on a regular basis. And last but not least, please know you're not alone. As with all the others in this amazing foundation and organization, there are people and resources to support you along this journey. Today, we're going to cover building your team. We'll talk about who you should have on your team and the role each person plays. We're going to develop your special needs plan, how your unique situation and what you want for your future and your child's future impact your planning, government benefits, and the future cost of care. We're going to talk a little bit about special needs trusts and how they can be a great tool in planning, and I'll give you an overview of ABLE accounts. What are they and how do they work? Okay, let's dive into this. So, number one, most important thing to take away from today, if you don't know this already, families should never leave more than $2,000 directly to their child with a disability, even if in a jointly held account. It's very important. Why? Because in order to qualify or continue to qualify for certain federal, state, and local benefits like Medicaid, Social Security, or others, there is this asset and income test that apply. And so we need to remember this rule as we're going through this. This is the whole point as to why we use the different tools and strategies we do in special needs planning. When you're planning for an adult with Rett syndrome or any other disability, it's always important to have a team on your side. And this goes above and beyond your medical team. This goes above and beyond your education team. This type of planning is complex, and it's impossible, in my opinion, for one person to be an expert on all of it. So to set yourself up and your family up for success, your team should have at least 3 people. One, a financial professional, maybe myself, but definitely someone that can help you plan for all the financial goals you have for your child and for you. A specialist who can help you take advantage of government benefits that you're eligible for and resolve any kind of application or care management issues over time. And last, an attorney who has experience working with families like ours. If you don't have a team like this, that's fine, but it's really important to put one together as soon as you can. Whenever I start working with a new family, the first thing we talk about is the team. Who are we missing? Who do we need to find and interview in order to get this assembled? And once the team is working properly, the goal here is that they all work together to make sure that all your bases are covered and that planning for the future for your child is done in the best possible manner. Okay, so this is building a check and balance system for you and your family. It's really important. These 3 professionals they're not the same person. They do not work together. They are not on the same payroll. Very, very important to avoid conflict of interest there. So what do these folks do? Well, the attorney is going to help you develop legal documents, things like a will, power of attorney and power of healthcare for you and or your partner or spouse. Letter of intent, we're going to talk a little bit about what that is. That's technically not a legal document, but it is important to have one developed. Guardianship, that's a big topic as we go into this adult transition. When does that happen? What are the different types of guardianship? Which one is right for my child? You know, I talk to a lot of families, and guardianship is different. The rules and how it works are different in every single state, and it does not transfer state to state. So if you are planning on moving down the road, or I work with a lot of military families that move state to state, guardianship can become a little bit of a challenge. So that is definitely one thing you want to consult with your attorney about and talk through what those options are and what are best for you and your family. And then last but not least, they're going to help us with the special needs trust. There are different types of special needs trust. Which one is right for you and your family determines how that document will be set up. What state you live in is also important, because special needs trusts are administered based in the state in which they're created. And then making sure that that attorney is also communicating with the other two professionals on matching those legal documents to the actual financial plan as well as the benefits. The financial professionals right there in the middle, typically, I describe this person as the quarterback, because your money and your financial progress typically change, sometimes quarterly, but definitely annually. So making sure you're looking at protecting. So what amount of insurance, what type of insurance, whether that's life insurance, long-term disability insurance, long-term care planning, investing, retirement planning, certainly ABLE accounts are in here. And then last, how much needs to go in the special needs trust? What needs to go into the special needs trust? And then if we have other children like we do, does it all go to Hudsyn, or do we split it half and half, or what percentage? Is it a percentage? Is it an amount? How do we figure that out? So that person or that professional should be helping you work through all those questions. Government benefit specialists, they're gonna help us identify and maximize all the state, local, and federal benefits that your child is eligible for. In addition to that, they're gonna do a lot of other things too. They're gonna help us with creative thinking around maybe housing. They're going to help us with if we have a blended family or a divorced set of parents. How do we start structuring this plan or this replacement team for mom and dad? What happens if mom dies but dad survives, or vice versa? What is that life care plan and what does it look like? So that is the role, is a really important role that's going to create a quality of life plan for you and your family. And certainly I know we're all working with these other professionals as well, right? We all work with doctors and teachers and therapists, and then some of the public and private programs that are available in our own communities. Once you have your team assembled, then it's time to start developing your plan, okay? The first step is to understand your current situation and what your goals are. It's something your financial professional can help you with, and it's something I spend a lot of time on with my clients, because everybody's situation is unique. And to make sure we choose the solutions that make sense for you and your family, we need to have a full understanding of where you are, where you want to go. So to do that, we start asking questions like, where do you work? What do you do for a living? Do we have one person earning income or two? How are you doing with spending and saving? What do you want out of life right now? And maybe what do you want a few decades from now? What are you dreaming about for your future? I know we spend so much time talking about our children, but I want to know what you want in your future. And maybe even what are you really worried about financially? And of course, it's important to know what you want for your child, right? That's why we're all here today. So when you think about their best life, what do you envision? What do you want them to have? Where will they live? Who will be caring for them? That's a big one. I get that one a lot. Kacy, who is the replacement team? I don't have any family local to me. How do I do this? And when I design that team, is my adult child working part-time? Are they able to communicate and use their device? Can they express their wants and desires? How will they get from place to place even? What's transportation look like? And certainly I'm very, very big on inclusion in different communities, right? So what are the social activities once we graduate high school and we get out of that school system where everything's kind of provided? Now what? I've heard families say a lot of times it's like jumping off of a cliff. We've gone from managing a child of K through, 18 or 18 to 21 program, and now we're in the adult world and it's completely different. So it's a lot to think about. But this is a foundation for all the planning that we're going to do. All right. So it's the starting point for us to figure out together, how do we get you from point A to point B and make that transition as smooth as possible. So when we talk about benefits planning, and this is a big step during transitioning from 17 to 18 years old, again, United States benefits here. Okay. So I know we have some people joining from different countries. Very, very important. This does not apply to you. This is very different outside of the US. But of all the benefits, some of the most important that we talk about during this adult transition is Social Security and Medicaid, and sometimes Medicare. How likely is it that your child will qualify? Well, I want to share with you a couple of examples because I think this will help work through some questions on when to apply, how to apply, and what do you really get. So first, supplemental security income. If a child with Rett is under the age of 18, the parent's income and assets and household size are used to determine the child's eligibility. Once the child turns 18, though, that changes. Since they are now considered a legal adult, the federal government looks at their income and assets instead of the parents. So if your child has less than $900 a month in income, and less than $2,000 of assets, they could be eligible for benefits starting at age 18. In 2022, that's this year. So for those of you seeing this recording next year, this could be different, just FYI, this is for 2022 only. That benefit amount could be up to $841 a month. I hear some families say they get approved for less than that. How do they go back and appeal and maximize that benefit? Right? Again, this is where the government benefit specialist is going to help walk you through what exactly you need to do, how to apply, how to handle the Social Security interview, etc. Okay, and we'll talk through this. Once both parents are retired, or if you're a single parent, once you retire and you start taking Social Security, your child could also be eligible for Social Security benefits as long as they were considered disabled or diagnosed before the age of 22. So most of you here, that is our current situation. We had a diagnosis very early on. The child benefit can be up to 50% of the parent's benefit, and it depends on the parent's work histories. What's great is that claiming what's called the disabled child benefit, I call it a Social Security or an SSI bump up, it does not affect the Social Security retirement benefits that the parents receive. So it has no effect on the parents. It only allows us to then bump up that SSI payment, and that payment bump up will last the rest of that child's lifetime. So it matters when you elect your own Social Security retirement. Your financial planner ought to be talking to you about these different options. And if they're not, you need to find someone who understands how this incorporates into the retirement planning. The important thing to remember here is that there are all kinds of benefits, and your child might qualify for some of these now. They might not qualify for them for another couple of years. But the important thing to know is, when does that change? When are the triggering ages? And how do you really stay on top of all of these things and take advantage of any new opportunities as they come up? Again, this is where the government benefit specialist comes in. This is who we're going to be talking to in terms of that team, right, of maximizing and really making all of the benefits efficient so that we can take less financial burden from the parents. It creates more financial security for your child. When you're planning for an adult child or a secondary dependent, it's really, really important to estimate the costs. What does it cost to do what you do for your child with Rett if you can't do it anymore? That's a really hard question, and I know that can stir up some fears, and it can definitely stir up some emotion. It is impossible to know every little bit of change or medical care or the nuances to their day-to-day life for years in the future. I know that. Hudsyn is only 12. I don't know what she's going to be like when she's 30, but I'm planning for it. Okay, so all we can do is really estimate what we know now, document it, and then try to start working through and thinking about what are some considerations that we need to be planning for in her future. So right now, you're probably providing a lot of the direct care for your son or daughter with Rett, and you're doing it for free, right? You're not charging them an invoice or giving them a bill for the care that you provide. However, every time you take them to physical therapy or speech therapy or occupational therapy, if you aren't there to do it, someone else needs to either be paid to do it, or we have to find some type of program or benefit that can cover it. So point being, the government benefit specialist is also going to help us work through what's called a quality of life plan. So they look at where you live, what exactly is the care you're providing. And by the way, there's probably more to what you're doing than you're even thinking about. The nuances of what you do may not be documented anywhere that can be readily available. And so we want to make sure we get that documented and down. And then at the end of this project, you're going to have this potential annual cost. So you're going to look at where you live, the care you provide, and then what are all the benefits that your child is eligible for. And we're going to net out what is the actual out-of-pocket cost to plan and care for your child. So see, this is where we get all of these different life plans or the questions that we talked about on the previous slide, and we start to build the actual life plan for your child. So once you've got these numbers figured out, that's where then the financial professional is going to come back in and make sure that we're projecting that into the future. We're taking into consideration investment returns and any kind of asset transition or funding plan. And that way, see, we start to build in this very accurate way of funding the special needs trust. This is where I feel like most financial advisors don't go to this level of detail, and it's really needed. It's needed because if you don't do this, we don't have a proper funding plan for the special needs trust. We don't know how much it needs. So it could be too little, it could be too much, we don't know. All right, so going through this quality of life plan exercise is extremely important. For those of you who are not familiar with special needs trust, these can be set up for your child at any time, okay, to help provide funding options to supplement the government benefits. So the benefits we talked about earlier, Social Security, Medicaid, these all cover the bare necessities for your child, things like food, shelter, utilities. But a special needs trust can be used to pay for things that the government benefits don't provide, but it can help build that quality of life that you really want for them. For example, I had a family who they took their child to HIPAA therapy, right? Equine therapy. That isn't covered by Medicaid or waiver services generally. So we needed to build that into an out-of-pocket cost into the plan because she wanted her daughter to continue to have HIPAA therapy long after she was gone. Okay, it can pay for things like supplemental medical care, technology, entertainment, travel, right? Paige mentioned the trip down to San Antonio to Morgan's Wonderland. I think that's awesome, right? It can pay for things like that. So if someone leaves money to your child that goes directly to them, in other words, they are the beneficiary on the beneficiary line, then that is considered now an asset in their name. The way that we avoid that and to protect their access to the government benefits is to title the beneficiary as the special needs trust. So instead of saying a part of my 401k or life insurance or whatever is going to go directly to Hudsyn and Seitz, it will say this is going to go to the Hudsyn and Seitz special needs trust, data, da da da. Okay, so it gives us the best of both worlds where we can still maintain access to the government benefits and all the valuable things that those provide in terms of home and community-based supports. And we get to then maintain inheritance. We do not have to leave our child impoverished after we're gone. There are a few more things you should know about special needs trusts. Earlier, we talked about how an attorney should be part of your team. They develop these with you. Very, very important you find a licensed attorney who does special needs planning or what's called elder law in your state. If you don't have access or don't know of one, let us know. We can help find resources for you in terms of that. The attorney is also going to work with you to name a trustee for the special needs trust. While a lot of families in my experience have named a family member to do this, this is the person who is controlling the money in the special needs trust. More and more, I'm recommending families consider what's called a corporate trustee or somebody that is a professional trustee. This is a fiduciary. It's somebody who administers and manages special needs trusts on a regular basis. And the reason I recommend that more and more is because typically family members are not experts in Medicaid and Social Security law. They most of the time have full-time jobs and families of their own or kids of their own. And administering a trust like this is a full-time job. And I know that because I help manage investments inside of a lot of them across the country. The trustee's job is extremely important. And without that professional entity, sometimes it can be really hard on one family member, or that family member makes a mistake that they didn't know about would cost the beneficiary from their government benefits access or Medicaid access. So I just think having that professional role is really critical. You can still have a family member be co-trustee, meaning they can still be at the table for care decisions and check and balances and all of that, but consider having that as a professional role. When you're thinking about how to fund your special needs trust, you may want to consider life insurance. I'm a big believer in funding special needs trust with life insurance because it's one of the only things we can send to the trust completely tax-free. And it's immediately liquid as soon as it goes into the trust. So it provides a lot of flexibility and immediacy in a time which is usually critical. The trust can also be created so that any remaining assets pass back to family members if the primary beneficiary passes away. So if your child passes away, we can keep the assets and the money still in the family. It does not have to go back to pay back government benefits or any other place. One of the handouts I'd love to offer anyone who's viewing this is called a letter of intent PDF. This is a really great resource to use and to start to develop for you and your family. I call this your last set of instructions. When you die, this is the place where whoever is taking over the care is going to go as their instruction manual. I joke, but I'm half serious. I wish both my kids came with their own instruction manual. That would have been nice. But this is everything from doctors and medications and all of that, that we would normally find in any kind of care plan. But it also includes the quality of life part. It includes their schedule day to day. Where do they go to school? What are their community activities? What are things that they really love? What are things that they don't love? Some important nuances. I'll give an example. I had a family who had a kiddo on the spectrum, and he had to take medication before going to bed. And he refused to take it unless he had a bite of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It was his thing. I don't know, but that was his routine. If that wasn't documented somewhere and mom and dad passed away, okay, that could be more than just a crisis situation. Now that this child has lost their parents, in addition, we can't get them their medication. The letter of intent is where we document those little things that are in the back of your mind that you think, it's not that important, or maybe it isn't that important, but this is where it needs to be documented. I actually use mine as sort of a master document. I'll take it to IEP meetings. I'll take it to our case manager meetings and our waiver reinstitution or reapplication status. I use it everywhere because I want it to remain updated. I want it to remain current, and I want people to become familiar with Hudsyn in this format. Okay, so this is totally free to you guys. Use it. If this is the first step you take in this planning, that's a big one. Okay, so if you can make a goal to get this done by the end of the year and have it electronically saved and then sent to a couple of key people, that'll be a huge win for peace of mind. You may also have heard about something called ABLE accounts. This stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience. These are tax-free savings accounts for people who are diagnosed with a long-term disability before their 26th birthday. They can be set up at any time, and they can be very, very helpful. That's because while a lot of people with disabilities depend on government benefits, like we talked about, anything we put into ABLE accounts are not countable against those benefits. The only caveat there, Medicaid doesn't count anything. However, if your child is receiving SSI, then we need the account balance to remain under $100,000 in total. Contributions are post-tax federally, and they are not tax deductible, okay? Some states do allow state income tax deductions, but not all states do that. $16,000 a year is the contribution limit. That's a calendar year limit. Assets grow, or the money inside grows tax-free, and as long as you use it for your child specifically, they come out tax-free. We can use this for education, housing, transportation, all kinds of things. Basically anything that would improve your child's quality of life is justifiable as an expense. In an ABLE account can go back to reimburse the state for any kind of Medicaid support. Some states have rescinded that. They do not actually abide by that. In Kansas, where I live, we don't have a Medicaid clawback on our ABLE accounts because of our governor passing that law. So if you want to check on your state and how that works, a place to check is ablenrc.org. This is the National ABLE Resource Center. It's run by the National Disability Institute out of Washington, D.C. So they are responsible for educating and keeping families updated on these ABLE accounts. The other thing I wanted to mention about that payback clause, ABLE allows you to pay for final expenses. So even if you had some money left, I joke, but I'm half serious when I say if Hudsyn passed away and we had $20,000 left in her ABLE account, we're doing a celebration of life at Disney or somewhere amazing. Okay, we'll spend it. So don't be afraid of that Medicaid clawback. All right, which state is best for you? That depends on which state you reside in. For example, Florida does not allow out-of-state residents to open their ABLE account. However, Ohio does. So there are some nuances, and you need to check this resource or talk to your financial professional about whether this is right for you and your planning or not. We've talked a lot about planning specifically for your child, and I know that when you have someone with a disability in your life, it's really natural to put them first, especially when it comes to this topic. After all, you're the person caring for them, right? You are their be-all and end-all, and financial planning is something that they cannot do for themselves. So you're very, very important to them, meaning if you don't have financial security, neither will they. So it's very important that we put your financial security first as well and make sure you have a solid plan in place. So the best way to do that is to work with your financial professional who can help you look at the big picture and identify your goals. You probably are not going to put a plan in place that covers everything all at once. It's just not realistic in most situations, which is why when we start working with families, we talk about priorities. Okay, we figure out what's the most important thing to you personally right now. You know, and if it's applying for SSI and that's the only thing you can think about right now, that's where we start. Okay, and then after that, the next 3 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, what is next on the list? And we do it one at a time. So we hope to help eliminate that level of overwhelm, or that feeling of overwhelm, to help you make progress. Finally, life obviously has a way of changing on us and on our kids. And so when that happens, the plan has to change with that life circumstance. So the best way to do that and to stay on track is to make sure that you're reviewing your financial plan, your legal plan, and your benefits and resources. Maybe not annually, but at least every few years. Okay, really, really important you have that review in place. I know we've covered a lot today and we're coming close to time, so I just want to review some of the highlights that we went over. First, you need a team. Okay, you need a financial professional, a government benefits specialist. By the way, if you need one of those, let me know. I'm happy to give you a national resource that can help you with that. And an attorney, an estate planning attorney who you trust and have experience in this planning. These 3 experts are going to work with you and your family to create the plan that will help you understand where you're at right now, figure out what you want for your child's future and for your own. Make sure you're getting all the benefits that your child is entitled to, estimating how much is it going to take, how much is it going to take to replace me as mom or dad, and what is that future cost of care. And then finally, really looking at establishing and funding a special needs trust and or an ABLE account. I get a lot of questions around, should I have an ABLE account or a special needs trust? I like the word and. Why not both? Right? They have very different rules and how they operate in terms of what they'll pay for and how much money can go into them. So sometimes it's really beneficial to have both. Sometimes it's not. I meet a lot of families that don't technically need a special needs trust. If you don't have assets to pass on to your child with the disability or with Rett, you may not need a special needs trust, but an ABLE account might be helpful. Okay. And then finally, don't forget to plan for yourself. Again, your financial security will directly translate into their financial security. All right, Paige, I'm open to any questions you want to go over with our viewers today. I'm going to go ahead and put my email and phone number on the screen in case anyone would like to reach out, schedule a consult. I'm happy to answer any questions you're not comfortable with answering today online.
Great. Kacy, thank you so much. That was incredibly wonderful. Let's leave this slide up resting for a moment so people can either just take a quick screenshot or a picture from your phone or write down your information, because I know you sincerely do want to extend your services to anyone who would like to work with you, and I can't recommend you enough. So we do have a few questions in the queue. We have a few minutes left. I think we can get through 4 or 5 of them that have been submitted, and then if anybody has questions that are very unique to your situation, reach out to Kacy. If it's something more relevant that might be generalized for the Rett syndrome community, let it come through me so that we can develop a QA document that we can post online afterwards, okay? And I also want to let you know that this won't be the final concluding webinar that we are going to have on adulthood, because it's a complex, deep subject, and we are going to have additional topics that we'll bring to you throughout 2023. Okay, so Kacy, if you want, go ahead. Let's just go on video. We can do stop screen share for a moment, and let's talk about some questions that have come in.
Great.
All right. Again, thank you. I have to say, I know so many families across the country who know they need to do this work, but have deferred it because every day a new priority seems to surface, and you're just like, I need to get to this. I need to get this. I'll get to it someday. But as Kacy has said, please don't delay. You know, just get it on your calendar, make the time, meet with a financial planner, meet with a legal team, make some progress here, because the unexpected does happen, and I've seen it happen despite our best efforts. So that's just Paige's words of advice. Please don't let this keep falling down on the list of priorities. So we had someone who sent in a comment, and I'm gonna say it first because it's true, to just thank us for the webinar series. Their child is 37 years old and the only person with Rett syndrome in their town. So they really rely on IRSF in these webinars to get their information. We're a rare disease. That may be the case for many of you who are on the webinar today. Their experience since their child is aged out of school at 21 has been really different, much different than they expected. So their advice is just really make sure that you have that guardianship conservatorship in place as they become 18, and continue connecting with the community for advice, and plan on it evolving and your needs evolving with time. Okay, so the first question is exactly this. When should you start putting these plans into place, and how soon before they actually turn 18, Kacy, and your advice should parents and caregivers start working on this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think a lot of us experience, just as complex parents, right? We experience the what ifs a little bit sooner than maybe more neurotypical kids. Really, the sooner you do it, the better. But the Social Security legal age of applying is your child's 18th birthday. You can't apply before that. You can if you want, they're just going to kick it out of the system. But applying on or after their 18th birthday, as well as guardianship in most states, is usually right at age 18. Now, for the guardianship, depending on your state that you live in, you may want to start that process 3 to 6 months ahead of time. And the reason I say that is because it does require a court date in most cases, which means a judge has to approve it. And so getting that scheduled, depending on how busy the docket is in your particular county or state, you may need to do that a little bit sooner rather than wait. The downside of waiting is just that you could run into a situation in terms of, you know, power of attorney, power of healthcare that a hospital requires, or if you're traveling and you don't have those documents and your child is 18, there are more and more places that are not communicating, unfortunately, with parents until they have those documents because of HIPAA. So it's terrible, but it is required. And I know there have been some other questions in terms of, do most Rett parents get guardianship? And I would tell you, I think it's a wide variety. And I think that is really based on the family situation and where on the Rett spectrum your child lies. So it is really important to consult with an attorney about that specific question. But how soon before they turn 18? 3 to 6 months for guardianship. Social Security is right at age 18. You can do it online. And generally that happens usually within the next year.
Great. And yeah, I think the pandemic is a perfect example of something no one expected, and it backed up the case logs and kind of created some delays for people. So just don't count on the system staying stable for you. Plan on things taking time and change. So a reminder that we are recording this webinar. We are going to put it on our YouTube channel, but we're only going to leave it up for 1 year because laws do change, process does change, and we don't want people to go back and watch this webinar and anticipate information being the same. Yeah. So we'll run it again as things change, and we will have it up on our YouTube channel for just a limited time for that very reason. Okay, I think we have time for 2 more questions. Okay. Kacy, and then we're going to have to conclude for today. So let's go with this one. So we're in the midst of changing from one waiver to CDCS. They want to know if there's one place nationally to get information as to how each state works differently with disability funding. One state that they lived in, funding was more centered in daycare, and the new state that they live in is going to be more centered on supporting help in their home. And it was help them so much in knowing about moving and where to live if there was a national data source that could help break down state by state kind of implementation regarding funding per state.
So here's the fun thing about state to state funding is it's all different. Where states and how states allocate disability funding is based on the leadership and the doctrines of that state. And I know that from experience in working on the DD Council in Kansas. However, there is a national resource, and it's a little bit more, I wouldn't call it a data source, but I would call it a support service for you and your family. And there's an organization, it's not a nonprofit, but it is a private organization called National Care Advisors. nationalcareadvisors.com. You can go to their website, learn a little bit more about them. They're actually based in Ohio, but they have families that they help in all 50 states. And I work with them mainly for families like, again, the military families who are moving state to state, or families who maybe have a job transition and they have a choice of which different states they want to go to. It's very, very important that in that determination, we know the pros and cons of each state based on the disability or the diagnosis. And so National Care Advisors can help you say, all right, I'm interested in Texas, Ohio, and Florida. Okay, and here are the pros and cons of each based on the different services you and your family really need. So the answer is yes, there's a resource. I wouldn't call it necessarily data-driven. I would call it more experience or support-driven, which is, in my mind, really what we need, because data becomes outdated very quickly. So state to state, you can look up all kinds of different statistics in terms of how are these waivers funded, right? How much money is that state putting toward the waiver, which, by the way, does not guarantee that actually boots on the ground services are delivered well. Just because there's money there doesn't mean that it's actually being provided to families that are experiencing that. So National Care Advisors, great resource, great people. I've worked with them for a decade. I've never had a family complain about their value and their services, so try them out. The other option is you can also work with just a really good experienced case manager, but they need to be someone who has multi-state experience, which sometimes is hard to find. So sometimes we can get into a regional kind of care navigator, and certain states have those as well. But National Care Advisors is awesome. They would be a place that I would be very comfortable and confident recommending.
Great. Thank you for that referral. And I did put it in the chat. So if you'd like to look at the chat, you can find that, and we'll see if we can have them as a guest speaker in the future. That would be wonderful. Thank you for that. Okay, so I think in closing, there was one question that is about the compassionate allowance program, and what does that mean, and is Rett syndrome on that? And so I'd like to address that if you don't mind, Kacy. So a lot of questions come to us about when does their child become eligible for SSI, and it seems to be it's dependent on our family's income. Well, there's something called the Compassionate Allowances Program, which really is a federal standard for what services based on specific diagnoses or disabilities someone can immediately qualify for. And Rett syndrome is on that Compassionate Allowances Program list. So I put in the chat a link to that program, and I encourage everybody to go to ssa.gov/compassionate allowances and take a look at it, because case managers come and go, they change, they're new. A lot of case managers, physicians, other advocates in your life may not be aware that Rett syndrome is on this list. And that kind of gives you a fast pass to some certain support services. So, in closing, we could have a whole conversation about this, but I want you to know that Rett syndrome is on that list. And I put the link directly in the chat. Kacy, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, just that I'm so grateful to be here, and I hope this was valuable to everyone in attendance, and also anyone who's watching this after we complete it and put it on YouTube. I'll just say, continue to advocate for your child. You're their best advocate and resource at the moment, but also remember, we don't have a choice when any of us are going to go. And so it's really important to have a plan B or even a plan C. And taking these little steps and doing these little things is only going to make it that much better and easier for your child when that does happen. It's not an if, it's a when.
Yeah, it's a heavy topic, but we will all sleep better at night if we have a plan in place, right? Yes. And not just one plan, but a plan B, C, D, and E. All right. Kacy, thank you. I look forward to having you join us again in the future. And I know that you host a lot of webinars yourself. So look her up, follow, look for advice. And we appreciate so much that you have taken on this very complex job of benefits planning on behalf of families with special needs. So thank you for your work, and good luck with all of your future cases.
Thanks so much, Paige. Bye, everybody.
All right, so to our attendees, I want to thank you and hope you for joining us today, for sticking with us. Hope you found value in the program. Please join us for the third part of our Transitioning into Adulthood series, which will be December 6th. We're going to have a panel of families talking about real life options that they've put into place for their child with Rett syndrome, both male and female, whether it was a parent. We're going to have some siblings who have become the primary caregiver of their child, of their sibling with Rett syndrome. And I think that is going to be one of the best programs in this series, because you can hear all of the things we learned about from Jessica Nickrand about transition of care in the medical world, along with the life planning that Kacy spoke about in part 2, is all pretty theoretical until you hear what real families have encountered and the success that many of them have had, whether keeping their child at home, going into placement, having another person in their family become the primary caregiver or guardian when they themselves reached a point in their life when they were not able to, or perhaps moved out of state, and just all kinds of different complex scenarios, as well as what the classic path into adulthood looks like. So please visit rettsyndrome.org and sign up for part 3, which will be on December 6th. And in conclusion, my request to everybody, but especially to families, is that you try your best to understand how to advocate for our nonverbal children and to remain optimistic and replenished in your lives because their success hinges on you. So please take the information learned today, apply it, share it with others, join us, believe in your children. You'll be part of something very special. We have a whole series of RettEd webinars in our digital library on our YouTube channel. Look at it. There's almost 50 topics there, and we'll be continuing to add in 2023. We look forward to seeing you virtually at the Raise a Glass Gala, so register for that. And I know many of you will get a chance to meet each other in person in strollathons throughout the month of October and September. And last, let's all be in. Let's be all in for Rett syndrome. Participate in October awareness campaign, and join us in December, and join us in San Antonio for our Rett Away in 2023. Thank you, everybody, and that concludes this month's webinar.